So today we're going to be covering the tangent function and periodicity. So first of all, I want you to recall that the sine and cosine functions have a period, and they repeat every 360 degrees or every 2 pi. That's not the same for tangent. Tangent's a little different. It repeats every 180 degrees or every pi. And we will see that in this lesson today. Remember that tangent is the same thing as sine theta over cosine theta. And when we want to look at finding our values for tangent, we're actually taking those values, sine over cosine, to find these values here on the screen. So for instance, I'm going to look at the value of tangent 120. Tangent 120 is the same thing as saying sine 120 over cosine 120. Sine at 120 is square root of 3 over 2. And cosine at 120 happens to be negative 1/2. So we want to find out what this is. So we're going to actually rewrite this. I'm going to put this up here. Square root of 3 over 2 divided by negative 1/2. Remember, when you're dividing by a fraction, you're actually going to multiply by its reciprocal. So square root of 3 over 2 times 2 over 1. And here the 2's will cancel, and we end up with just the square root of 3 over negative 1, or negative square root of 3. And I'm going to put that right here. If I put that into my calculator and solve for tangent, just put in negative square root of 3, you end up with a decimal that is negative 1.732. And that's how you would go about finding these other values. I already know these values, so I'm just going to fill them in. But one thing you should notice is that they are the same as these values over here, but in reverse order, and they're negative. Once again, they repeat themselves in reverse order from here over here. So I'm going to have square root of 3 over 3. One. Notice that they're the same. They're positive here. It's undefined at 270. Why is it undefined? Because sine at 270 is 1. And cosine at 270 is 0. And you cannot divide something by 0, so it's undefined in those two places. Then we're repeating here again. Negative square root of 3. Negative 1, negative square root of 3 over 3, and 0 again. If I were to graph these on this graph right here, you would notice back in the beginning it said that tangent at 90 degrees was undefined. So I'm actually going to put in a dotted line going up and down here, and that's going to indicate that there's an asymptote there. The other place it was undefined was at 270. And it would be undefined again at 450 if we were to go on. So I'm putting asymptote lines there. Drawing this tangent line, you'll notice that starting at 0, it's positive. And then here, it's negative, but then it'll be positive again. And it's repeating. Now, notice my drawing here is not very good, but it would look something along those lines. Okay? So here we have a nicer drawing of tangent. So you can see it repeats itself every pi. We have a 0 at every pi. So starting here is a 0. And then at pi, and at 2 pi, and at negative pi. Those are the zeros. The y-intercept in this case is right here, also at 0. And then it doesn't show the asymptotes, but if you look, they're here at every 90 degrees, where it's every half pi, so to speak, is where it's undefined. So now this wants to tell, in part 1a, it wants to know the domain and range of the function. The domain, in this case, is any x value that's possible in this graph. Well, if you notice that at 90 degrees, at 270 degrees, at 450 degrees, it's got an asymptote there. So there's no x value there. So we're going to say the domain for this is all real numbers except odd multiples of 90 degrees. The range, the y values, well, it's all real numbers because it can be any value either going positive direction or negative direction. The question is tangent an odd function, an even function, or neither? Well, if you recall back from chapter 3, we talked about odd and even functions. An odd function is one in which if I put a negative x value in and I get the function, the outcome to be totally negative, then it would be an odd function. So we have to ask ourselves, if I put a negative value in for tangent, would the outcome be negative? Well, we could do that. We could put in, say, 30 degrees. Let's try tangent of negative 30 degrees. Well, that's the same thing as saying tangent of 330. If we were to look back at our chart, we would see that tangent at 330 is negative square root of 3 over 3. This happens to be the same thing as negative tangent of 30 degrees, which happens to be square root of 3 over 3. So yes, this is an odd function.